to the official podcast of FCS Fans Nation with your hosts Kyler Neal, Matthew Frazee, and Jamie Williams.
FCS Fans Nation. We are back. Actually, Jamie, Kyler, and I have been here for a while. The true individual who is back, can we call him a special guest since he's no longer in the intro? Ladies and gentlemen, Lawrence Duke Dog D-Law is back with us on the podcast this week. Welcome back, Mr. Lawrence. We bow down to the greatest Eastern Washington and James Madison fan that exists out there. Lawrence, welcome back to the podcast. Why don't you just inform us how life has been for you, because we know things are pretty outstanding in your world. Give us a recap, my man.
Well, after being absent all but the final episode last year due to just time circumstances, mostly related to planning a wedding, I finally had that wedding, and now I've got a lot of free time. So joining you boys here tonight.
Awesome. Beautiful ceremony that I know Jamie and Kyler attended.
I'm just glad you were able to make the bachelor party, Matt, even though Lawrence wasn't.
Yeah, the original plan, a little bit of a bachelor party in for Frisco for Mr. Duke D-Law. But I think we'll have maybe a post party, right? You're planning to come down for Frisco this January. Is that correct, with your beautiful bride, Lawrence?
We'll be there.
Heck yeah. As will the FCS Fans Nation admins, and we will see what two teams are there. And maybe week 2 has given us some hints in terms of some contenders and pretenders. As welcome to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. You guys are listening to a podcast ran and operated by the FCS Fans Nation page on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, shameless plug land. You are joined by Mr. Jamie Williams, Kyler Neal, Lawrence Smith, and Matthew Frazee. I don't want to take up a lot of the vocal time tonight because I love that Duke D-Law is back with us. So we're going to have you three kind of take these questions, and I'll do my best to host and throw them at you. Are you gentlemen ready to get things started? As you know, we've switched our format on the show. Are you ready for our first Big 7 questions? Let's kick it.
The top 7 FCS topics of the week. This is the Big 7.
He could not be getting the Big 7 kicked off any better, guys, with another FBS doomed week at the hands of a great FCS squad. It is why, if you're watching this on YouTube, our banners are red. Our background photo is a Jacksonville State player storming the field after they defeated Florida State this week. And that is where we start with Mr. Brandon Owens asking from Cocky Nation. He wants to know, gentlemen, what does JSU's win over Florida State mean for them moving forward? A huge win by the Gamecocks. And Lawrence, you're the one rocking red tonight. So since you're right on theme with us and you're back with us, buddy, why don't you take it away? I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts.
Well, for those listening on the podcast streams, the red I'm wearing is certainly not Jacksonville State. Although beating Florida State, that's a pretty good one. So props to them. I may not be wearing your school's logo, but I'll rep you in my heart for the next 24 hours. I think, Brandon, JSU doesn't have any excuses now. We've talked the last couple of years about, maybe there's a little bit of rebuild, maybe there's a little bit of potential that hasn't been lived up to. But you take down Florida State, I mean, what FCS team is realistically, supposed to stand in your way this, for the rest of the season? If you can take down the Seminoles, why should you have any trouble with anyone at our level? But that also means the pressure is on, and I think for some of those figures, whether it be Coach Gross, after this marquee win, if you underperform the rest of the season, like JMU did after beating Virginia Tech in 2010, maybe your hot seat is not cooled off as much as you might expect from getting that FBS scalp.
Yeah, I mean, really, what does it mean? It means you got some breathing room. I know 0-2 with 2 FBS losses wouldn't be a big thing, but it does afford Jacksonville State a little bit of wiggle room. If they happen to trip up, they still have that win on their resume, walk-off win, lots of publicity. I mean, it's all over Sports Center. But as Matt has the schedule up here, it makes October 23rd seem like we might have a game. The defense looks good for Jacksonville State. They got, Nicario Harper is a Buchanan Award finalist from the spring, is on the watch list this fall. So leading that defense, it's not an easy schedule. But I think we've kind of saw the highs and the lows from Jacksonville State. They just looked awful against UAB. Nice bounce back. You better win against North Alabama. Do not make this a trap game. Hello, Holy Cross and Merrimack. But yeah, what does it mean? A little breathing room, and we'll see.
But it has to be all positive, doesn't it? Because if you think about scheduling, simple rating system, everything that's involved with a playoff format, would 0-2 to FBS teams even matter? Sure, you may not have one more FCS win, but it doesn't really hurt you. And now you've played 2 FBS opponents. One of them's a victory. So you got murdered 31-0 by UAB. That doesn't matter because some teams could go play Mercer. If NDSU played Alabama, they lose by 48 points, but they could still win 10 other games. So to me, this is nothing but positive because now you've got a 3-point victory over a Power 5 school. They're pretty down, but still, to me, pretty impressive. And of course, their schedule comes down to a pretty big stretch of Sam Houston, Central Arkansas, and 2 weeks prior to that, Kennesaw, even though I think they'll win 2 out of those 3 games. I don't think they'll beat Sam Houston, but a little bit of breathing room, Kyler, or is there really any negative here to JSU starting? What's it look like moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, definitely created some breathing room because, you look at the rest of their schedule. They do have a few tough teams. The AQ7 is not a walkover conference that's happening this year. But here's kind of my take on this game. For one, I was telling Jacksonville State fans, I even texted Brandon Owens, relax. It's one game versus an FBS. This type of thing happens all the time. You do see blowouts, even if you think you shouldn't be blown out. What's real big difference from maybe this year versus last year in these 2 games? For one, if the coach is out scheming you and they're FBS, they have more talent, they're going to pull away no matter what. Florida State, we saw them play Jacksonville State last year. They didn't out scheme them last year. Now they played again. They didn't out scheme them this year. The big difference was Jacksonville State looked a lot better in the fourth quarter when last year, that's when, Florida State started pulling away. Maybe that has to do with Jacksonville State playing in the spring, being more prepped, having more actual, reps with their current team, live rosters, instead of taking such a big break. I mean, this is one of those things in the fourth quarter, they still look dead even. Now, yeah, Florida State, they made some of their own mistakes. And if this played 10 times, Florida State probably wins a majority of it. But the nice thing was in the fourth quarter, Jacksonville State didn't get gassed. They didn't die like they did last year. They held in, they stuck it out. They proved they are still a very good FCS program. They're still a playoff caliber team. It would have sucked going 0-2 just because it gives the possibility of having one less win. And you never want to have one less win on a schedule at the end of the season for seedings or playoff resumes. So the only thing that would have hurt them going 0-2 versus the FBS is just it didn't give them an opportunity to add more win. That completely canceled it out now. Now this is even a better win than an FCS program. Overall, hell of a game, hell of a weekend for Jacksonville State. Like Jamie said, don't let this be a trap game in the next few weeks, but hold your head up high. This helps 100%. This is awesome.
And if you add that into, let's say they don't win all those tougher games. Let's say they win all the easy ones that we project them to win. How do you guys think this would affect them for playoff seeding if they're just able to look respectable against maybe a close loss to UCA, maybe, only a 14-point loss to Sam Houston? I'm not saying you'd want to lose, but are they still in playoff bubble range then? Are they not completely eliminated? Is that the impact?
8-3 with a P5 win?
Yeah.
That's playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's something different, right? Because Ohio Valley, I mean, you could get 1 or 2 losses and maybe be bounced, but this conference just looks so strong, right? Crazy what it could actually turn out for Jacksonville State. I think they need to be commended. I don't think enough people are giving kind of the respect. I watched the play because I've been so busy this weekend, and I was just mind blown. That last play, I'm like, okay, even watching the replay, I'm like, this guy's going to get tackled, right? He's clearly going to get tackled. Absolute insanity. I think it means a lot for Gamecocks. We're going to touch on them a little bit later. So really impressive by them. Congrats to Bruce and Brandon and everybody else that we know who's a Gamecock fan. Really big opportunity here. And so now it's time to eat a little crow for somebody. Mr. Kyler Neal, you are being called out by Brad Jans, an awesome NDSU fan on our page. And Brad would like to know, on the subject of how the gap between the FBS and FCS is widening, how much crow does Kyler actually have to eat before he starts sprouting wings of his own? Ooh, Kyler being called out because
0.
FCS fans are saying you have told them that the FCS and the FBS gap is not shortening. Now is a time for the defense to take the courtroom and plead their case. The jury is listening, Mr. Neal.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to stick by with what I said. Sure, there's been success the last few weeks. It's still down compared to the average. I mean, if you look at the last 10 years, the last 2 years were horrible. This year, it's kind of near, maybe even lower than the average has been the last 10 years. In 2013, there were 16 wins versus FBS. What's the difference? Look at everyone who maybe had an upset this season. Let's go down that list. Can you scroll up? Because there's 8 teams. Now, out of those 8 teams, how many of those actually had games in the spring? 8 of them. I know like a lot of people like to say Montana didn't play in the spring. They played 2 games. That's still more prep than they have ever had in the spring going into this season. So you have 8 wins versus 8 teams that actually had physical playing time. 7 of them actually played a full spring season. You know, UC Davis was eliminated at the end, but they still played 5 games. And then what you have in this weird spring season was we got to keep all of our players. This scholarship number is almost identical. I mean, sure, we have, JMU has about 80 players on scholarship right now compared to the normal 63. Now, I'm not a big believer in the whole depth argument with the scholarships between G5 and FCS. I really don't care too much about that because at the end of the day, you're not having all 80 players playing the game. What I do care is this season, we have a lot of experienced players returning. You know, Eric Berrier would have been graduated. He's back. You have a lot of 4-year starters, 3-year starters who maybe only would have been 3 or 2-year starters. There's so much experience. So yes, this spring, maybe the gap has closed only this spring because of certain situations. But until we're in a regular season and we're having 3 FCS over FBS wins, like, 2019, or in the weird fall, I'm not going to count that last year, and more NFL players getting into the draft, getting drafted, overall, this trend is still down outside of this one weird season where we're still on a repercussion from the spring. So I'm still going to defend myself until it's maybe 2 years from now. And then maybe I'll eat crow for sure. I have no problem eating crow. It happens all the time. But for right now, nothing's been proven.
You will eat crow in Frisco. We will bring crow, an actual bird.
But yeah, nothing's been proven. We're still down compared to average. 16 wins in 2013.
I don't know. Lawrence, do you think people should hashtag fear the FCS a little bit more? What do you think, my man?
I don't know that. 8 wins in the first 2 weeks. I wouldn't call that down from the average. You mentioned 2013 when there was 15 wins, but basically in the 21st century, that's the one that's an outlier. So I don't know. Solid year so far, and we've got some more opportunities to get some FCS over FBS wins going through the remainder of the season. I don't know. I sort of agree with Kyler that last year and this year you kind of have to throw away weird circumstances. It's literally different circumstances between the 2 divisions. So like it or not, it's not a level playing field. Whichever way you fall, whichever side of the fence you fall on for this argument. I think it's something we have to keep an eye on going forward.
The other thing, how many of those 8 teams that got beat are going to play in a bowl game? Maybe a couple. Washington stinks. Tulsa stinks. UNLV stinks. Colorado stinks. UConn should be in D2. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. Ohio, no, not the state.
Jamie's going for the throat.
Florida State, so what? They're good wins. Don't get me wrong. To see South Dakota State blow out Colorado State, Montana beating ranked Washington. Washington's terrible. Sorry, Montana. It's a good win, but at the end of the day, Washington's going to be like 3-8. So, yeah, don't get me wrong. It's good to see, but I don't think Kyler has any crow to eat because it's still, it's what is it right now, 8-58? You good
It's
with that?
close.
I mean,
Yeah, it may not be overwhelming. I
Now,
don't know.
here's where I was 100% wrong. The over and under, I said under 5 FCS wins. So, yeah, I'll eat crow on that, but I'm not eating crow on has the gap automatically now just shrunk out of nowhere. I don't think there's enough evidence to say either way, but yeah, I'll eat crow on. Did the FCS win more games than I thought they would have this spring? Absolutely. But if you look at the fall podcast, there was an episode where I was talking about, I think we're actually going to see more upsets. And I don't know why that I just totally went back on it the last few episodes, because I said the spring season is probably going to help us prep for maybe some of the other FBS teams.
It will be interesting to see how it plays out, as we still have actually a ton of more matchups left to play. But I think overall, the gap that really has changed is NDSU and probably 5 to 6 other teams. That's really the gap that I feel like has changed in terms of the FCS. I don't know if it's changed between FCS and FBS, but we definitely have seen more. Hate to go off on a complete left road, but we are seeing more top tier title teams than I can remember in a long time. So that's going to make the regular FCS a lot of fun. And speaking of those top 2 teams, guys, Mr. Peter Mooney, an awesome JMU fan, he says some big games next week between likely 2 top 10 teams, James Madison at Weber State. He wants to know, how do each look through 2 weeks, and what are your predictions for the matchup? We'll save the predictions for, obviously, this will be our game of the week. Right now, James Madison ranked number 3, Weber State ranked number 10. That is likely to change. Maybe not, as the stats poll drops off tomorrow. Speaking of the stats poll, we have 2 of our voters here, Jamie Williams and Lawrence Smith, from the official stats top 25. And Lawrence, you're the JMU fan. I know D-Law is as well. But kick us off, my man. How does JMU look? How's Weber look? What's that huge matchup looking like right now?
I mean, it's looking like what we thought it was gonna look like in the when the schedule came out. It's gonna be a good matchup. Both teams look really good. JMU looks really good on offense. Cole Johnson has benefited from playing in the spring. He kind of looks like he might need to be added to the Peyton Award watch list. We're going out there for the first time, so it's going to be interesting. Weber's defense seems to look pretty good. I mean, you can't really say much about what, losing to Utah. It's a good team. They did what they were supposed to do against Dixie State, but to see JMU completely dominate a team that a lot of people thought had playoff aspirations in Maine after they gave Delaware all they could handle, pretty encouraging on both sides of the ball for JMU. I mean, Lawrence from the other side, I don't know what you saw from the distance. I didn't see much of the game yesterday.
I mean, JMU looks like JMU. I think that's the most accurate way to say it. The Dukes are what we thought they were going in this year, especially once we found out that Cole Johnson was coming back. And you're right, he looks like a championship quarterback. He looks like a potential Peyton, one to follow. 9 touchdowns through 2 games, 0 interceptions, and that's a pretty good clip so far. And the scary thing is JMU's not even at full strength right now. We've got guys that are coming back off of the injury list. The Dukes could get even better, and that should be scary to the rest of the subdivision. Weber has looked good as well, but I've got a couple concerns with Weber. Of course, they had a blowout win this week, but keep in mind they were playing Dixie State, so you got to take that with a grain of salt, the same way that you would have to take JMU's Week 1 win versus Moorhead. The biggest thing that concerns me with Weber, though, is their running game. Against Utah in Week 1, they were only able to garner 60 yards total rushing, and yeah, that's an FBS team. It's a tough matchup, but Weber has been one of those teams that has prided itself on ability to establish a run game, and JMU's defense in general, nothing to slouch at. If Weber can't get that run game going, they can't hold their own on the line, it could turn into a long day. I don't necessarily see it, being a complete rout, but I think JMU definitely has the upper hand in this matchup from what I've seen so far.
So JMU had to walk into Sam Houston, obviously, and that's a very maybe different style that you're bound to see. Kyler's more in that Big Sky country. Kyler, you've talked about this matchup a little bit in terms of styles and how that may have an advantage for James Madison. What are you looking at there where Sam Houston was able to take a James Madison down, which seems like a nearly impossible task the last half decade in the regular season especially? What are you seeing there in differences between these squads and what kind of matchup we're about to witness?
I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the Sam Houston win, because Sam Houston, they were a championship team last year. But really, if you rewatch that game, James Madison was eating themselves alive in the second half. It was one of those games where I don't see James Madison losing that again if they rematched. I mean, you don't collapse that bad, but props again to Sam Houston. Now, when I'm looking at Weber versus JMU, I'm glad you kind of talked about the style difference that I've been saying. I think this is just a bad style matchup for Weber State. Even though playing in Utah is tough, I don't see Weber State being that competitive in this game. For one, Lawrence already kind of alluded to this. What's going on with their rushing game? Josh Davis, is he still injured? I mean, he's only has 17 yards on the season. He's not playing. He's not getting the reps. He was their Jerry Rice Award winner who kind of pushed a lot of teams around back in 2018. Like he was a beast. The last 2 years, he's been injured half of the games. Now he's not really even playing the first 2 games, and I don't know what that is. Barron, I mean, he's still a young freshman quarterback because he has an extra year. He didn't look good against Dixie. It was one of those things where, hey, guess what? The defense capitalized, and then the running game started late in the game. It was a very close, competitive game for that. The first half. Weber couldn't score. Dixie couldn't score. The good news was, Weber has the better players. Eventually, they were able to wear down Dixie. They're not going to be able to wear down James Madison. I don't think this is as exciting as a game as their rankings is going to be. Or, the Big Sky champion versus the CAA champion. I don't think it's a good style matchup. James Madison has a defense that can completely shut down Weber's running attack. And then I don't have faith in their passing attack to get through the air against James Madison. James Madison is probably going to be able to score, not whenever they want. This is definitely a different team than they played Maine or, whoever you played in the first week. I forgot about what that team was because that's even worse than Dixie. But overall, I think this is a horrible style matchup for Weber State. James Madison by at least 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's kind of my goal. 3 touchdowns? Yeah, I don't think it's going to be close. I think it's a bad style matchup.
Jeez,
there's some games where, there's some teams who you could be really good, and it's a positive style matchup against an elite team, and sometimes you can make that elite team look bad. This is one of those teams where Weber's a good team. They're playing an elite team, and the style matchup favors the elite team. That is not something you want to have when you're playing an elite team.
Also on the road. On the road, though.
It is what it is. It's not Utah in December. It's not Utah in November. It's going to be a beautiful day, probably sunny, probably 55, 60 degrees, something like that.
Am I supposed to just find faith in Coach Signetti's big-time matchup clutch game moments on the road? Am I supposed to find faith in Cole Johnson because he's thrown the ball all over the place against inferior competition? I mean, come on, let's talk real here. Are we just going to say Weber State has no chance? They're at home. They're a top 10 team. Just because they lose to Utah by just over 20 points. That's an FBS team. I don't know. Am I just throwing darts out here? Or am I just trying to play devil's advocate? Or are we just going to agree on? Are we just going to agree on everything?
Well, we'll have to wait and see what the
devil's advocate.
Like.
I'm not. These are things I've thought about. If it was in Bridgeforth, I'd be like, all right, I'll give you 3 touchdowns because you're not going to walk into that place and win. That place is a slaughterhouse, but this is on the road. This is a different environment. It's a different place. I'm telling you. And Bruce agrees with you guys. So, I mean, this is scary. I know it's scary. It's too easy. It seems too easy. Well, and this is the Matt Frazee heart argument. There's no facts behind it. It just seems too simple, right?
Well, it goes, I think Kyler style arguments thing. Look at the game you're showing. Right there. I said this when it happened. Weber was going to be a tough matchup for us. But I also said if we get past Weber and it's South Dakota State, we're going to eat all day because of the style matchup. At that point, Weber was playing the same way as JMU. They knew how to handle our offense and our defense, and they took advantage of it at times. Luckily, we found a way to win that game somehow, and then we destroyed South Dakota State the next week. The styles are not the same anymore. I mean, they want to run the ball. I mean, But so do we, but we're a little bit more balanced. I think we're almost 50-50 run pass balance. So we're not just going to try to run it down your throat. We're going to want to. And like Lawrence said, I think Mike Green actually plays this week, and Percy actually plays this week. So, I mean, you want to get your best offensive player and your best defensive player back after 2 huge blowouts. I'll make my prediction later, but I don't think I've hidden what it's going to be.
Jamie basically saying right now he's going with Weber. We'll look forward to his prediction at the end of the podcast. So, all right, guys, we'll touch on this a little bit more later, of course, as the game of the week. But this next question, I think it may be one of our best ones. It's from Mr. Joshua Hoffman, who is begging to be on the show. Joshua, life is busy and tough enough to kind of set this thing up. We'll try to get more guests on, but when Lawrence says he's coming on the show, he's coming on the show. We need a big overreaction for the first 2 weeks of the season. That's what Joshua Hoffman wants. I love this question. An overreaction. We have 2 top 25 voters on here. You guys know the top 25 polls. You know the teams. Dig deep here for me. Jamie, start. You're a voter. Start with us, my man. What is your overreaction after 2 first weeks?
Don't get upset, Matt.
Oh, no. He's coming back at me. He's like, now it's personal.
It doesn't have to do with the North Dakota State, at least. But
okay.
And it'll reflect in my ballot this week. But the overreaction that Montana's a top 2 team. Yeah, they look good against Washington. Yes, they look like a good team. They are a top 5 team. Montana's not a top 2 team, in my opinion. They can prove me wrong later. But until they start beating some of the Big Sky teams over and over, I still harken back. I mean, JMU was 6-5 when we beat Virginia Tech, so it means something. It's great, but it doesn't mean everything. And I know North Dakota State and Appalachia State also went and did what they did after picking up big ranked wins, but it doesn't mean that Montana's on this trail to just destroy everybody and leave everybody in their wake. I think they're a top 4 or 5 team. I don't think they're a top 2 team. That's a little bit that's my overreaction. And I think, Josh, the rule, to be honest, you have to be like 25 or so. But I don't know if that's written in the rules. That's why.
Jamie, just quick follow-on question for you before I get to the other twos. You kind of just said it there, but where would you put Montana? Because I believe they're one of 5 teams that could win the national championship this year. Do you agree with that statement, or would you push them out of that realm at this point?
I agree with that statement. I just don't see them as top 2. I think that's I think that's a little overblown. Top 5, put them at 4. I think they're either 4 or 5 in my ballot. I have to double check it.
Sounds good. Kyler, what is your overreaction to 2 weeks of FCS fall football?
My overreaction? I don't really have an overreaction for any of the teams. I mean, can we talk about the FCS overreaction in general? Thinking that just because a loss to UAB, and yes, you didn't look good in the loss, automatically meant JSU season was over. Like, the JSU fans were saying it's over. I was telling Brandon, I'm looking at your schedule. You have no reason to still be scared about the schedule, even if you start 0-2. You're still potentially a playoff team, or at least a bubble, even if you lose to the teams you're supposed to. I don't know. I just think these FBS games, if you win or lose, most of them are an overreaction. Some of the games like Eastern Washington and Colorado State, you guys were supposed to win those games. I hate when people are calling Eastern Washington a great upset. I think that is demeaning to the actual program of Eastern Washington. That was not a great upset. That was just only an upset by name, not an upset by talent, not an upset by coaching, not an upset by anything. So I think just in general, the overreaction to maybe the FBS games, because you never know. Some FBS teams, they do not get up for playing a lower tier team who they view as D2. They could give 2 craps about that team. And then that FCS team, this is the Super Bowl. That is the game you want to win more than even the FCS National Championship. I mean, if you talk to most teams, the JMU guys, what's bigger, the Virginia Tech win in your guys' eyes and the whole fan base 20 years down the road, or beating Youngstown State in a national championship? VT, what's Eastern Washington's biggest win? It's not even top 25 Oregon State, beating Washington State. I mean, you just have a different persona when you're playing these FBS teams. But again, it's good wins. And I'm going to disagree with Jamie in the fact that it's just UW's trash. They may be trash this year. The talent level is not trash. There's no way UW should ever lose that game. 100 out of 100, UW should win just because of the difference in talent level. But overall, I just think the season's going to play out. We do get these types of upsets all the time, and sometimes the teams that are upset in the FBS, they don't look good. Sometimes they do look good. I mean, it just varies. Look at what Holy Cross did. They upset UConn now. Yes, UConn is horrible. Matt said they're a hidden D2 team. Would have we thought UConn was going, or Holy Cross was going to lose to Merrimack? No.
No.
This is an overreaction of seeing week 1 and week 2. It's going to play out. But yeah, I mean, just overreaction in the games in general, the outcomes, unless you're playing true talent level, true playoff versus playoff caliber teams, then I don't think it's an overreaction. But other than that, out of conference schedules are funky, man. You never know what's going to happen.
This is true. Mine's very simple overreaction. The top 4 seeds are gone. They're done. The top 4 seeds in the FCS playoffs are locked in. Montana,
Nope.
James Madison,
Nope.
the winner of South Dakota State and North Dakota State, and
Nope.
Sam Houston. That's
Nope.
it. Those are your top 4 seeds. So if you want to be seeded in the playoffs, 5 through 8 are all that remain, because those other teams are going to either only have 1 loss or win enough. There it is. Lock it in. It's done. Oh, if that happens, this clip will be all over Twitter, time-stamped.
Definitely could, though.
I assure you that. Lawrence, an overreaction in the first 2 weeks.
I'm going to piggy off of what Kyler said, kind of. My overreaction is that anything that has happened in the first 2 weeks determines, what the rest of the season is going to be like. NCAA&T, they're 0-2. They could finish 9-2, 10-2, whatever their schedule works out to. Montana's 2-0 with 2 impressive wins. They could be 5-6. Guys, it's week 3 now. We got a lot of season ahead of us. Don't feel like your team has already punched their ticket. Don't feel like your team has already been written off. Like, let's get through the season, and I promise it'll be less stressful than if you have already decided your team's fate.
These guys are a little bit hypocrites for our listeners. They've already bought their Frisco tickets because they think their team's going to the championship. Every single person on this podcast, 100%. That's why they bought them. So, little overreaction. Kidding, of course. We bought basically the entire row of like row 5 in section 115 and a little bit of 116. So we've got quite a bit of property down there for that Frisco game. All right, guys, don't overreact to the first couple weeks, except book those top 4 seeds. Guys, this was a question asked last week. I don't know if Jeremiah Rash, an awesome Southern Illinois fan, asked it or not, but I think this could literally pop up every week on our podcast. It's an outstanding question. Who are the biggest winners and losers of week 2? I thought our answers last week were great. And Kyler, I'd love to toss it to you right away, man, if you're okay with that. Do you have a biggest winner and a biggest loser from week 2, man?
Yeah, I mean, we've already touched on this a little bit. I'm going to say Holy Cross, biggest loser of the week. Losing to Merrimack, that's pretty bad. I'm going to give a little bit of props to another team for my biggest winner, Northern Colorado. This is a program where they have never gotten any love, ever. They're the Bernstein Bears of the FCS. It is what it is. Yes, they didn't play a top-tier team. Houston Baptist is not a world beater by any means, but Northern Colorado was respectable against Colorado in week 1. Then Northern Colorado went over to Houston Baptist. I thought this was going to be a 10-point game favoring Houston Baptist, but maybe I could have saw Northern Colorado winning this game. Having Northern Colorado winning it wasn't going to surprise me. I thought it was going to be a pretty competitive game around the bat. They went in there and beat them 45-13. Northern Colorado may not just be this 1-win, 2-win Big Sky team anymore. Under Ed McCaffrey, it seems like they got a little bit of fire. Now, again, their schedule is brutal if you look at it. I don't expect them to go positive by any means. But just to see what the first year is after Ernest Collins left, who kind of was a 2-win Big Sky program guy, there's a fire under Northern Colorado. Maybe the culture's changing. This could be a decent team. They were a great athletic program in the D2 days. They actually have a good athletic department when you're comparing the rest of their sports. Maybe this is just the changing that they need, a culture shift. They look way better on paper than they were expected to. So I'm gonna give them my biggest winner, even though it's not against some world beater team or anything like that. It just shocked me when you see how much they just dominated, actually.
Awesome. I like those picks. Mr. Duke Dog, D-Law, do you got a biggest winner and a biggest loser for week two? Week two, which means everything. What do you got, my man?
My biggest winner is the UNI Panthers. I have been saying for, Jamie, how long has it been since JMU played UNI? How many months has that been?
Oh gosh, what is that now?
2 years
18
now. I've
months,
been saying,
just about, yeah, almost 20
I've
months.
been saying for the better part of 2 years now. That UNI's biggest deficiency and the reason I have had the most hesitation putting them high in my poll is their offense. And boy, did their offense look good yesterday against Sac State. 4 touchdowns on 4 consecutive drives. I saw a stat on Twitter that in their previous 100 games, as the first time they have scored 4 consecutive touchdowns, and only like the third time they've scored on 4 consecutive drives. So good look out of them. If no one questions UNI's defense, like that has been settled for just as long now. If that offense gets rolling, stays rolling, they'll be, a force to reckon with. My biggest loser is going to be the Albany Great Danes. This is a team that has been fighting for legitimacy in the CAA, and now they start the season 0-2. They lose to NDSU week 1, and they lose to Rhode Island in week 2. And their stud QB that they're trying to convince everyone is a Peyton worthy guy, Jeff Undercuffler. Through 2 games this season, he's got 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and the team has scored a total of 21 points. Not looking so good for them. So Albany's my biggest loser.
I am scrambling to find someone besides you and Albany. I kid you not. Those were my exact picks. I might just skip this whole segment now. Jamie, go ahead while I research to I throw something out there. What do you got, my man?
Okay, well, I'm going to defer my biggest loser till the next question. Seeing what that question is, that it'll go that way. My biggest winner is New Hampshire. New Hampshire has started 2-0. Both wins are against CAA teams. So they started CAA play 2-0. They get James Madison at home. They get Richmond at home. They do not play Villanova. They do not play Delaware. They lost Max Brosmer, their quarterback, for the year right before the season started, and I wrote him off. Brett Edwards has been really good. We know they've got the running backs, Carlos Washington and Dylan Love. They got some receivers. They're a younger team. They got a defense that can play with anybody. Do not throw the ball anywhere near Pop Bush because it's not going to be your ball anymore. So New Hampshire starting 2-0 in the CAA is my biggest winner, and they will make the playoffs.
Oh, calling it right now. Cool. I guess I can give a shout out to Harold Nichols and Presbyterian. I don't have a loser. That is your biggest winner. They had another crushing week. If you don't know about the Blue Hose and their coach, he doesn't punt. He does not punt, and they obviously play scholarship football. But their quarterback, Ren Heffley, has thrown 15 touchdown passes in 2 games, and the offense does not punt. For some context, Jeremiah Briscoe, I think it's 56 or 57, is the record in 2016 for touchdowns. And in 2 games, Ryan Heffley has thrown 15 of them. Team doesn't punt. I don't even know who they play next week, but this is literally Madden in real life. So Presbyterian, enjoy the high-flying offense. Next week, hosed by 50. Easy. I don't even know who they play. So there's my winner. My backup for what was you and I.
Love it.
This will be the first Division I team they play next week. The first D1 team. They didn't even play an NAIA team the first week. It was someone not even in the rankings of D2, D3, or NAIA. I have no clue what that was.
Dude, hosed by 50. Hosed by 50.
Is their coach that guy? Is their coach that high school coach that had that documentary about him a few years ago? Is it literally
doesn't
that
punt,
guy?
doesn't do anything?
Yeah, for Pulaski Academy, and I'm just Googling this, so I'm not a genius. 9 state championships, over 200 wins in 18 years. So, yeah, that's
just one quick shout out. One quick shout out to Kyler mentioned it, to Merrimack. Their first win against a ranked team is an FCS team. So shout out to Merrimack.
Heck yeah. Big victory. We love to see little guys start to work their way up. Golf clap and snaps. There we go. All right, guys. Jamie, you said you had some thoughts coming up on question number 6 here as we're entering our final 2 before our quick hit questions. Any explanation why Monmouth suddenly looks like crap despite returning everybody from the spring? Those are Jacob Martinez's words, not mine. We love you, Jacob. Awesome Kennesaw fan. Jamie, some explanations on Monmouth right now. Why are they looking so bad if they are?
Well, I've got a few points to make here. Unfortunately for Monmouth, they lost their right tackle and their leading tackler right before the season, so that could explain why they don't look as good. I will probably have to go ahead and stipulate and concede my wing bet to Kyler because Monmouth is not a quarterfinal team. And my biggest loser is the Big South Conference, of which Monmouth is a part. Now, I know A&T lost to Duke and Kennesaw to Georgia Tech, but Campbell lost by 1 point to Elon, a game they could have won. Monmouth, I mean, you got it there. They beat Fordham by 3. Chase Edmonds isn't at Fordham anymore. So, to me, the Big South Conference is now one bid. So that's where it opens up another bid, potentially, like we talked last week, for a third Southern Conference team. So just the way that the play has started for the Big South, who had lots of aspirations of taking that step forward, it's not going to happen. They're my loser.
Does this open back up for Kennesaw? Kennesaw is like obviously the sexy pick who has been beaten by Monmouth as of recent. That last game on the schedule, you see it. Kennesaw is going to host them. Does that open it back up for them? Does NC have a shot?
All 3 of those teams. I mean, Campbell potentially has a shot because they might have the best quarterback. Although I really liked how A&T's quarterback looked the other day, and I'm not going to give up on Musket. But there's decent teams there, but they didn't take that step forward. It's a one bid league, and I will be interested to see how it plays out. But to me, that's my biggest loser.
Well, they were so highly touted because, I mean, taking Sam Houston literally down to the wire, they're a touchdown away from the Bearcat Championship never happening. And it's not like they're doing what, I mean, 1 3-point loss really is that big of a deal, though. Are we going to overreact to that? Or 3-point win, I'm sorry. 3-point win over Fordham, and then they got blown out by an FBS school. And while it's not a great one, like, should we overreact to 1-1, or should we kind of be cautious here? Lawrence, Kyler, caution, or are we throwing in the towel?
Here's my thing about Monmouth. They have looked good the last few years, especially in this weird spring season. Spring season was really weird. Let's all just get that off our chest. It was a very weird season. But if you look at what they've done historically still, Monmouth is still Monmouth, in my opinion. Yes, they've beaten Kennesaw. But, I mean, they've been to the playoffs 3 times. They have 2 blowout losses. Their only win's Holy Cross. And again, last year in the spring, they were very competitive versus Sam Houston, where they actually could have won. But Sam Houston was very competitive with every single team in the playoffs. I don't know if that was a Sam Houston thing. Maybe they were playing down to the level of talent they were, or up. I don't know. I mean, they won. They had more heart. They had more grit. I always thought A&T was going to beat Monmouth. I thought A&T was going to win the Big South the first year. I don't think the first 2 games prove anything besides Monmouth is Monmouth. They're playing to the level of their competition. They're probably still going to beat Kennesaw because I think if you have a good defensive scheme and you know how to prep for a triple option, you can stop the triple option, and then that can rattle a team. Then you can take it away from there. Monmouth will still probably be a top 2 team in the Big South. I don't think the Big South is 100% now just a 1-bid conference. I still think they have a chance for 2 bids for sure, especially how conference plays goes. But I don't know. Yeah, they didn't look good the first 2 weeks. I mean, it is what it is.
It'll be interesting to see how they do on the road at Charleston Southern. Duke Dog, any final thoughts here on Monmouth before we move on, my man?
I mean, nothing that hasn't already been said. It was a weird year last year. It's going to be a weird year this year. I don't think they're out of anything by any means. I probably still make a push for the playoffs, but anything more than that, who knows?
One quick comment. Was that the Cheney train, Lawrence, in the back?
Yeah, you could hear that.
There you go. Yeah.
As a guy who grew up near trains out in the country from the train tracks, I got some chills there, some nostalgia.
That
Threw
was
me
awesome.
For anyone that knows Cheney, I live a block away from Zips, so the trains are frequent here.
Yeah, I love it.
Trains, water towers. It's a North Dakota paradise out there. It's beautiful. I love it. All right, guys. Final big question here before we roll into our quick hits. What are your thoughts on NDSU and Quincy Carter through 2 games? How would you grade Quincy's performances so far? Mr. Greg Gardner wants to know. One of our first really big NDSU questions that's popped up here, guys. Just so from some stats for you. Quincy Carter so far.
Patterson.
Quincy Carter. Wow.
Yeah, who's Quincy Carter?
Quincy Carter who pops up when a Leinenkugels is completely gone. That's exactly how he pops up. And I actually don't have those stats.
To play like Quincy Carter.
Yeah, Quincy Carter. Let's hope he doesn't end up that way. Poor Dallas Cowboys. Quincy Patterson III. Guys, what are some grades for him? How does NDSU look so far? I'll step away from this one as the unbiased Bison fan. What do you think, Lawrence? What are your thoughts on NDSU already 2 weeks in?
NDSU looked good against Albany, for sure. But like in week 2, the only thing NDSU really could have proved to me this week was that they weren't a top 10 team, or they played Valpo, right? Like that was going to be a blowout. Everyone knew that. No one was surprised. So I don't really think we learned much specifically about NDSU as a whole this week. Now, if we're talking about Quincy Carter Patterson, as an individual, I do think for all the hype he has gotten since he transferred from Virginia Tech, I'd kind of expect more than 3 total touchdowns through 2 games, even considering the offense that NDSU runs. I mean, if Trey Lance were playing against Albany and Valparaiso, even if it is 6.5 quarters worth of work, you think he would only have 3 touchdowns? And maybe that's just new quarterback getting into the system. Yeah, he's been in for a year, but you're finally getting real play time, live action, not just walkthroughs and drills. But I can help but think that 3 touchdowns through 2 games for someone whose reputation precedes them the way his does is not a bit disappointing.
I would agree with that statement. The one thing I've been telling Bison fans mostly is just that, hey, you have such recency, I guess bias would be the term, because you're expecting 2018, 2019 because the spring was so weird and Zeb was so bad. But you are expecting Easton Stick as a senior and Trey Lance, who's a 49er. And reality, you've won a lot of games, a lot of championships with Brock Jensen's style of quarterback play, including 2012 Brock Jensen, 2016 Easton Stick. While they didn't win the championship, that's where Quincy's at. He's a redshirt sophomore, regardless of what the roster says because of the COVID year. He hasn't really played a lot. He is a perfect Bison quarterback on a team that's going to play really good defense and run the ball really well. He's efficient enough to win a lot of games. So what do you think, Mr. Kyler Neal? What do you think about NDSU? As you've been very high on them for like those top 5 teams.
I think it's hard to judge how good NDSU is from the first 2 teams that they played. Albany does not look very good. And then just to give you a little clarity, Valpo, they were projected to lose against Central Washington in a simulator by over 20 points. So that just shows the type of quality of opponent Valpo is. But I think Patterson's looked the part. He looks like a perfect NDSU quarterback. He's big. He can throw. He's got a great arm. He can throw fast. He can lob it. He can run. I mean, he's a typical protege NDSU quarterback on what I think can make that offense successful. They can't just have a quarterback who can sit in the pocket and just sling it. They need someone who's going to be able to spread the field, move with their legs, take advantage of some of the defensive schemes that they're seeing. Overall, I think Patterson's lived up to the hype so far, but I'd like to see him versus better competition than when he's played so far. But overall, yeah, I can't complain. He looks the part. He looks like a quarterback that can bring North Dakota State to a national championship caliber level. So overall, I liked what I've seen. I just want to see him play versus better competition before I give him, an A+ 100%. But he looks good. He looks as what is expected from my part.
Jamie, I ripped your QB apart. It's your turn, man. Go ahead.
I mean, he has 93 yards rushing and 212 yards passing, 220 yards passing in 2 games. He's obviously terrible. No, I mean he's doing what he's supposed to do. Just like Kyler said, he's doing what he needs to do within the game plan that Matt Entz and that offense wants to run. And right now, he hasn't had to do too much. I think he looks good. He's got a rocket arm. Looks like he throws a good deep ball. When he has to get in there and move the team down the field with touch passes, intermediate passes, I'd like to see a little bit more of that as the season wears on, just to get a better read on him. But he's done what's been asked. I mean, Zeb Nolan couldn't have done what he's done. And like we said, Valpo, they lost to Indiana Wesleyan by 18 in week 1. So it's the same as not overreacting to Morehead State, James Madison. But what you do, you just look at individual things, like the throw that's on the screen there. That's a good throw. That Zeb Nolan probably throws that into the sideline. But
not at South Carolina.
Yeah, well, South Carolina's way better, right?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's just you want him to progress week by week in the offense, add a little bit more each week, and by the time you get into conference play, and especially down towards the marker game, you want him to really have a hold of the whole offense, and I think they're giving him small bites at a time. I think they're bringing him along well. I mean, he threw 5 passes last week, so that's all he needed to do. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to say, like Kyler, it's incomplete, but he's on the right trajectory.
Yep, it's going to be kind of a waiting game. We'll see how they look at Towson, a CAA opponent, as they head out on the road. Really at UND in that first weekend in October is going to be where people will really start to nitpick and see how he does on the road against at least a top 25 opponent. So awesome, guys. Well, that hits our big 7 questions that we took away from our fan questions on the page. It's now time to get into our final segment, our quick hit questions, to see, make sure we give everybody a shout out. So here we go.
Just because your question is answered quickly doesn't mean we don't care. These are the quick hit questions of the week.
All right, guys. So is Stephen A. Austin for real? Mr. Jason Plotkin wants to know this. He says they beat a transitioning Tarleton State team 20-10 and became the second FCS team in 2 years to give Texas Tech fits. We're not going to know a lot about them because their upcoming schedule is pretty weak, but traditionally these guys have not fared very well. But is Stephen F. Austin, Rev, and others we know love this team? Are they for real? I'm going to toss this one to you, Jamie. What do you think? This is a purple team, so I know you love them. Do they have it in them?
I think they're heading in the right direction. They're the Quincy Patterson of teams. They're heading in the right direction, but they're not there yet, just like Quincy. But he may be, and they may be. I'd like to see them beat one of Sam Houston, Jacksonville State, Central Arkansas. I think this is more a team that you can look at for next year to really take that leap, but they need to start learning how to win and building that this year. They gave Texas Tech fits this past week. So they're not a fraud. They're good. They're improving. They've had some good recruiting classes. I'd look for them more to really compete next year over this year, but I'd like to see them pick up one win you wouldn't expect.
Okay, cool. So a transitional team working their way into next season. Guys, Mr. Preston Owens, awesome Duke fan, great writer and contributor to the page. He wants to know, how did JMU make Maine look so pedestrian? Lawrence, honestly, I was shocked by this. Maine, I guess they've had a few good seasons, but is Maine that bad, or how did JMU pull this off?
No, Maine is not that bad. In fact, Maine is normally a team that gives JMU certain fits. You might not know it by looking at some scores of that matchup, but Maine has historically held their own against JMU. I think the key was that the new sort of newly formed offensive line for JMU held their own. They didn't skip a beat, even after losing an All-American and Liam Fernadel. They're opening holes left and right, for the running backs. And then, like we mentioned at the top of the show, Cole Johnson looks like a Peyton Award quarterback this year. Maybe he wins it, maybe he doesn't, probably doesn't. considering the style of offense JMU runs, I don't see that 4.5 touchdowns per game clip being maintained through an entire season. But you gave the voters a little nudge that said, "Hey, don't forget about me. I'm still here. I'm gonna captain this championship caliber team. So just keep me on your radar." How did JMU make Maine look so pedestrian? Just dominance in each phase of the game, because fact of the matter is JMU is the better team in all three phases, and they went out and showed it on Saturday. That really as simple as the better team did what the better team is supposed to do.
James Madison taking it to a fellow CAA team. Kyler, I will give you 30 seconds to get something off your chest.
Yeah, Maine's pedestrian.
I
don't need 30 seconds.
Kyler just doesn't. He doesn't believe in Maine. But there are those style of matchups within conference for some reason, even if they're bad, you typically don't do well against. So that is a fair counter there. Okay, guys, next one is a group project that we're all going to get an F on. So Brandon Anderson is asking us. He says, if you don't know this, Dominic Ganella, he's the NDSU running back. He's also a professional baseball player drafted by the Arizona Diamondbacks into their minor league system. NDSU hasn't made this a secret. The Diamondbacks obviously announced it, and there seems to be no rule against it, considering the NCAA hasn't said anything. Also, doing some Google research, like guys like Tom Brady and others have been drafted by MLB teams while they're in college. He wants to know, could there be a rule named in spirit or reality after Ganella in terms of them cutting this off? I don't know anything about this rule. I honestly know nothing. I just know with name, image, likeness that they're not going to change this. Like with players getting more abilities, more rights, more freedom, they're not just going to cut them off from the ability to do two things at once. Does anybody have like remote explanation of how they draft players in MLB and anything like that?
I tried to do a little teeny tiny bit of research on this one, but it got confusing very quickly, and so I gave up pretty quick. But from what I read, and my interpretation of this rule admittedly could be completely off. So if anyone listening to this or watching knows better than I do, please let us know. What I read was that if you're drafted out of high school, which with the 1,000-round Major League Baseball draft is, fairly common, you can have an agent negotiate on your behalf. But once you start playing a sport in college, you have to cease relations with that agent until the time comes that you resume playing professionally. Now, I don't know how that relates in this case. I don't know, did he get drafted, negotiate his own contract, with the minor league team, and not have to include the agent, so he's scot-free in that case, or maybe he did have that agent and just while he is playing in college doesn't have the relations under that rule.
Interesting. See that stuff. Hey, that works for me. I'm giving you a little bit of golf clap for that one. I'm surprised Kyler doesn't know. He's wearing a baseball hat in Seattle Mariners.
The reason why I don't know is because I am a Seattle Mariners fan. In terms of professional sports, they have the biggest drought in postseason history for any sport. So this is my excuse. If anyone else is a baseball fan of another team, then you guys don't have excuses because you should be baseball fans. My team is having a great year this year. It's probably going to fail. They're probably not going to make the playoffs because that's what we expect in Seattle Mariners land. So, yeah, I don't know baseball. Go Griffey.
Go Ken Griffey. All right. Well, Dominic Ganella, if you choose to go the baseball route post-college, good luck to you. And hopefully people and our fans can give us more clarity on that rule. So, Kyler, which FBS victory by the FCS will be the biggest fraud at season's end? Ooh, so we've already got like 8 victories now. Which one are you going to look back on and be like, look, that FBS team was not as good as you thought it was? That's from Mr. Dustin Helton.
Potentially all of them. I don't think any of them are going to be as good as what the teams were expected to be in the preseason, besides maybe your UConns, your Colorado States, your UNLVs. those teams are going to be as good as they were expected to be. They were not going to be good no matter what. But everyone else, it seems like they're on the trajectory to have a bad season compared to what they were playing. I mean, Florida State did play Notre Dame really good, but so did Toledo. And is Toledo a world beater, or is Notre Dame down? I mean, that's one of the things. I'm just not positive, but overall, I mean, I still think to this day the most impressive win on the season is still Montana versus UW. But does that mean UW's going to have a great season? Doesn't look like it. It looks like they're going to have a pretty mediocre season, maybe a really tough one, like Jamie said, maybe 3 wins. But yeah, probably everyone.
Frauds maybe all around. Lawrence, you got a comment before we move on, buddy?
Yeah, I think this one's super easy. The biggest fraud is ETSU over Vanderbilt. And I don't mean to say that ETSU isn't like a solid squad, but it's Vanderbilt. Like, let's keep our blinders on. Let's not get distracted by the fact that they're an SEC team. It's Vanderbilt. So all I'm asking, don't discredit ETSU for the win, but let's just put the right amount of stock in like a team beating Vanderbilt.
So Vanderbilt beat Colorado State. So you're basically saying that South Dakota State's a fraud?
Yep. Bums.
Yeah. Transitive property worked out. Yeah. Math checks out.
There's a website that we can use to connect all that, guys. Speaking of frauds and close losses and things like that, SELA actually had a pretty good showing, guys, this last week. After a 45-42 loss to Louisiana Tech, Danny Johnson wants to know, just what kind of chance and promises do we see out of SELA moving forward? Jamie, you've been ranking this team. You've been putting them in certain situations around that mid-tier. What do you think about SELA and just an instant reaction after that close loss?
I wish they would have been able to pull it out. I mean, I think they're the best team in the Southland. Cole Kelly looked like the guy that won the Peyton Award in the spring, 44-59 for 495 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ran for another 42, 2 more touchdowns. Unfortunately, took 3 sacks through 2 interceptions. And like Danny mentioned in his question, you can't turn the ball over if you're going to pull that upset, but they gave Louisiana Tech everything they could handle. Terry Bradshaw was sweating at the end of the game. But they're the best team in the Southland, and I think they're going to maybe make some noise in the playoffs because that offense is not going to be easy to stop no matter who you're going against.
SELA's offense turning it out. They had a good showing, like you said. Wish they would have pulled that one off. Guys, I'll take this one from Bruce Edmondson. He wants to know, when do term limits kick in for the big 3? Actually, you know what? I don't think I'm as well spoken. And plus, we have a special guest tonight. Let's toss it to D-Law. D-Law, when do term limits kick in for the big 3 from Mr. Bruce Edmondson?
I will answer your question, but before I do, I need to make a comment on Southeastern Louisiana. Yes, I am a Stats Top 25 voter. And no, I did not vote for Southeastern Louisiana in my week 1 poll. And Lions fans let me hear about it.
Yeah, they did.
In my defense, I was camping and put together my poll on my phone. And it's not that I didn't think your team was good enough. It's that I am stupid and forgot to write you down. But it was my poll, and I put my name on it, so I had to stand behind it. So I will admit that not including SLU in my week 1 poll was a huge miss, and I have rectified that situation this week.
You put him number 2.
Had to put that out there. I put
Had
the number
to let
19.
Number 19, SELA in there. So I guess I can take Bruce's question back because I thought you were waving to get that one out there. That's a phenomenal story. Camping affecting the top 25. I love it. Term limits kick in for the big 3, Bruce. That's on conferences. Like, we have never sat here on this podcast ever, anybody, and said for the history and length of time that the CAA, Missouri Valley, and Big Sky are the big 3. It was the SoCon. It was other conferences back in the day, but there have been rises and falls with App States, Georgia Southerns moving on, shifts in the climate, Coastal Carolina. We've talked about this many times. Term limits will expire based off the production of those conferences when they match up in the playoffs. That's when things will change. So, all right, guys, final question here before we get our game of the week. This one's really great. It's from Mr. Keel Wilson. What compliment would you give to any rival FCS school that you envy or hate the most? Richmond does not count, so you can't. Oh, you can't use Richmond. Dang, Kyler. I guess while we let Duke Dog and Jamie think of some backups because Richmond's gone, what would you say to your rival FCS school that you hate internally?
You got a good fan base. You got a good stadium. It's a cute little town. It is what it is. You got a good team. It's better for the FCS when you're better. I don't know. There's too many positives if I had to actually sit back. Montana, it is what it is. We hate you because of your fan base, but at the same time, your fan base is awesome. They rep your school well. You got a great facility, great team, really great everything, and it is nice to have you potentially be back because when you lose on the red, it's only going to feel so much sweeter.
Ooh, he had to throw the jab in at the end. Montana. Yep, they got a lot of positives, man. That one's tough. As an NDSU fan, UND would be the biggest rival. I proudly serve in the North Dakota Air National Guard, component of the Air Force, right here. We get a ton of really good airmen because of UND's aviation program. Their aviation program is top-notch in the nation. A lot of people want to go there. It's very expensive, so the Guard helps pay for it. So there you go, UND. Your aviation program kicks butt and helps the military out, which is pretty cool. Jamie, fierce rival. What do you hate? Something that you can at least envy about them.
No, I'm breaking Kia's rule because really I'm on this show and he's not going to mute me. I would like to compliment Richmond on having a lot of empty seats at their stadium so that JMU fans can come and visit October 16th. I can't even get through it without laughing. So thank you, Richmond, for having no fans and allowing us to make this Harrisonburg South.
Oh, man.
Winner.
Yeah,
Loved
just
it.
sitting on that one. Lawrence, what do you got, man? You're in a two-school alliance at this stage of your life. What do you got?
Well, Kyler already spoke on behalf of Eastern, and Jamie has already spoken on behalf of JMU. So I will speak on behalf of the FCS as a whole and compliment fans of NDSU. The fact that you guys have the mental fortitude to live in Fargo, North Dakota year-round is respectable.
Oh,
For sure.
minus
I don't know
20.
how you do it. I don't know how you do it, but damn it if you don't.
Those two compliments from the JMU guys. That's like when you're trying to pick up a girl in a bar and you're like, "Man, you look really pretty for having one eye much larger than the other."
Yeah.
You bring them down with a compliment.
That was the Barney Stinson backhanded
Exactly.
compliment from How I Met Your Mother. Is exactly what those were. Oh my goodness, that too good. Keo, great question, man. Thank you for letting us end on a really, really fun note, my man. Guys, let's roll into our game of the week before we end our podcast. The serious faces are on. Number 3, James Madison, 2-0 at number 10, Weber State, who's 1-1. Likely those rankings may change a bit. This is recorded on Sunday, dropping on Monday. All right, guys, what do we think? Game of the week. We will let our special guest and our main man, Duke Dog, kick it off. Your Dukes traveling to Weber State. What do you think? Score and winner.
I think this is going to be the first real show me what you've got matchup for both teams, considering, there've been a couple cupcakes on the schedule. There've been, an FBS team on the schedule, but like week 3, like now it's go time. Like, show me what you got. I think, both teams probably feel each other out for the first quarter, maybe most of the first half, but man, JMU is just a juggernaut, and both offense and defensive line look real good. I think it's going to be a long day in the trenches for Weber, and I think JMU is going to sort of wear Weber State down and run away at the end of the game. I will take James Madison by a score of 31-17.
31-17 Dukes. Kyler, what do you think? Do you agree with that victory?
Style matchups are key. Unfortunately for the Big Sky, this is a style matchup that maybe only a few teams even are going to be competitive against JMU. Weber is not going to be one of them. It's going to be a long day for Weber fans. I'm sorry. I like all of you guys. Weber State Weekly. You guys are awesome. I love interacting with you. It's going to be JMU 38, Weber State 10.
Wow, big shutout there. Jamie, your Dukes versus Weber State. What do you got?
Okay, well, a couple of things that do concern me. Lawrence touched on a little bit. Slow starts in big games for JMU. We started slow in most of the playoff games. We started slow against Sam Houston. It took us to the second quarter to get going. And the way our secondary has been prone to the long balls, and Rashid Shaheed scares the crap out of me.
He's a beast.
He's great. That said, Weber should be more scared because we could come at you so many different ways. I mean, Cole has been great. We got Kalon Black. Oh, he's a freshman because Percy hasn't played. Percy may play. Mike Green hasn't played. He's probably playing, rotating 9 and 10 defensive linemen, which will help in the elevation. And while I do think Weber can get a couple of deep shots, I think overall the consistency of the JMU offense and the tenacity of the defense that doesn't let up on the run game at all. I think you're looking at I don't want to disrespect Weber, 45-17 win for the Dukes, though.
Dang, going big. 3-0 on the Dukes. Well, I'm 1-0 in the pick'em because I picked Missouri State last week. Who was that? Jamie or Kyler who joined me in that pick for Missouri State over Central Arkansas? Was that you, Kyler?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Kyler. I think Jamie went with the purple team.
Geez,
I'll go with the purple team in this game. I think it's going to be like a last-second field goal when all hope was lost. I'll say 31-28, Weber State at home.
So like
JMU
the real
scores,
Titanic moment.
Yeah, like JMU scores and they think it's all over, but then Weber like somehow gets down the field and their really good kicker who's been there forever makes it or something. So 31-28, pulling that score out of a random hat. We'll go Weber State with the upset.
So like a JMU player will score a touchdown and then stand up on the bench and like taunt the student section, right?
Correct. Yep. I've thought this through. I've seen it in a vision, a YouTube style vision that this is how this could play out.
One other thing to call out here real quick. Talking about kickers, nostalgic kicks by Ethan Rackey. Just past week, he tied Montana's Dan Carpenter in field goals.
Yes, he did.
FCS career, and passed him in points. So when JMU goes up 3-0 early in the first quarter, he will break that record in a Big Sky stadium.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. Snaps and golf claps. Good job, Ethan. He was in our over-under as well, which the overs are doing substantially well at this point. Guys, we have expired for our time.
When he makes that kick, it will still be past his bedtime.
I love that. Guys, we have worked past our bedtime and our times for the FCS Fans Nation podcast. We thank Duke Dog D-Law for coming on. We'll give him the final word here at the end, but make sure you follow us at FCS Fans Nation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. This podcast can be found on all platforms from Apple Podcasts to Spotify, Google, anywhere that you are using your listening devices. We're always ran by the FCS Fans Nation, so we really appreciate everybody who posted a question. We will continue to have our pick'ems and our top 10s released and just a lot of really good interaction on our pages. Lawrence, why don't you send us off here with any of your final thoughts and the biggest boom you can give us as we work our way towards a really exciting week 3, man?
Well, I certainly didn't prepare any final thoughts, so I will just default to thanking the fans, all the members of our page. I know as a page, we are coming up on 10,000 followers on Facebook and 4,000 followers on Twitter. None of this would be possible without those followers, those that click on the posts that we make and the podcasts that we release. And honestly, the 4 of us here and the 5, 6, 7 of us that officially run the page wouldn't have any reason to do it without the page members being there to form the community. A community of 7 is nothing. A community of 10,000 is everything. So thank you to our glorious members.
Absolutely beautiful. We appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks for listening to FCS Fans Nation. Enjoy week 3. week 3. We will see you guys in week 4. Boom.
Thank you for listening to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred listening platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, or even YouTube. And make sure to follow our FCS Fans Nation social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening to the premier podcast for FCS football. Boom.
All right, this is a summer shanty, so we're going to see how well this creates a sound of a popping can. Are you guys ready?